Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. Tyrannists fear the power of your conviction, of your confidence, your faith, and your kind love. They even fear your smile. So know your power, strengthen it, and use it wisely. So this is a quote from my guest today, Rubacek, and it's going to be the foundation for what we're talking about. Because while there's plenty of doom and gloom news out there, trust me, I know, we're going to be focusing on how we can proactively resist and defeat the evil that's enshrouded our earth. But before we get started, today's show is brought to you by Rise TV, a Patriot-owned streaming platform. With all the big tech censorship and the demonetization going on right now, the subscribers at Rise TV are literally the reason I can bring you this critical information today. Over at Rise, our mission is to uncover the truth, no matter how dark and difficult, while always holding on to hope. So we've got a massive content library and an amazing community of patriots, and you get to hang out with me and my guests for the second half of every show and ask your questions and share your thoughts and ideas. So if you have any specific questions for Kay, make sure you join us on Rise TV. And on top of that, you're going to be able to watch Kay's documentaries on Rise TV. So there's a link for a free trial in the description below. You should go ahead and click it now. That way you're all set up when we're ready to cut the public streams for the exclusive Q&A during the second half of the show. Also, make sure you're following me on Telegram and Truth Social at Man in America. And more importantly, you can catch every episode that I do as a podcast as well. So if you want to listen while driving or while cleaning the kitchen or while feeding your chickens, you can. The links to my podcast and social media are all in the description below. So folks, I am very, very excited to have Kay on my show today. She's actually not just someone that is on the front lines of fighting against communism, but she is a dear friend as well. And so I'm honored to bring her on. So let's go ahead and give a warm welcome to Kay Rubacek. Oops. Okay, your audio is not coming in. There we go. All right, go ahead.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much, Seth. No, that was a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad to be talking with you today, especially on this topic.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just to give a little bit of a background, actually, as a lot of you know, watching, I used to work for the Epoch Times and the media group with NTD and everything. And that's actually where I met Kay. And she was also someone that just had this passion in her soul to fight against communism. And so, Kay, I know you're an Australian originally, and you actually knew my wife back in Australia, which is pretty amazing. But why don't you go into a little bit of your story? What has taken you, from probably a comfortable life in Australia to being someone that has to be on the front lines fighting against communism?
Well, what's interesting is that I am Australian. I was born in Australia, but I was actually born into a family of Russian immigrants. And so my family escaped communism 3 times. Not just once, but 3 times, over 3 generations, 3 different countries. First in Russia, they had to escape when it became the Soviet Union and the Bolsheviks took over in the 1920s. They escaped, my dad's family escaped by foot for 5 years, traveling for 5 years to find safety. Just that story alone, there's so many stories of people that have escaped communism historically, and I'm meeting them every day here in the US. And so my story is not unique, but the fact that I'm talking about it, I think, is. And so my family got to China, and that's where they found safety for a while before the Chinese Communist Party took over. And then that's when they had to escape again. And my father, who was born and raised as a young Russian boy in China, was very fortunate to be able to escape. With his family, they survived a horrific famine, one of the worst environmental disasters in our history. He was very fortunate to survive. And they came to Australia. And like most people, they forget the tyranny that they came from. Once you find that level of comfort, you forget. My husband's family escaped communism from the former Czechoslovakia, the Eastern European bloc, before the Berlin Wall fell. And what I see consistently, and what I grew up in Australia, was a sense of freedom, and tyranny is someone else's problem, right? That's how we often see it. But now it's everybody's problem. Now it's something that we're all facing. And I've seen it in Australia. I received a very socialist education through the college system, and I felt something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And it was really only after I moved here to the US that I started to realize what I'd been taught in Australia what communism was. And even though my family lived it, experienced it 3 times, they didn't want to talk about it. But here in the US, I was able to open my eyes to what's going on here. I did also spend a day in a Chinese prison as a human rights advocate in China. And that's when, I had my eyes open for me again to see like these people in China are being forced to believe and speak lies. And how does this work? And so it really set me on this journey, which was, you met me midway through that journey, Seth. And really that was a very important turning point for me. And when I was working with the Epoch Times, I could see that they had that foundation of understanding the evils of communism. And so that was something that was very important for me, is to find people who actually can understand and are willing to speak about the true history, because communism has never been tried for their crimes. And I really believe that's part of why we don't have a good definition for what it is, and an agreed upon definition like we do for other crimes, such as what happened in World War II with the Nazis. So all of that combined has led me to where I am now in upstate New York, and absolutely a freedom advocate to remind Americans really what we have here is amazing and worth fighting for, and we need to know what we're up against with tyranny these days.
And I think that a lot of Americans, especially, especially with what happened a couple of years ago with COVID, they really were shaken from that comfort. And I think Australia, especially, which is now seeing a level of tyranny they probably never imagined. I mean, growing up, I always looked at Australia as probably some kind of like Texas. It's like a free Texas. Everyone's carrying around big knives and wrestling alligators, and just everyone's good day, mate, like having fun, relaxing. But they're now realizing that that can be on the flip of a switch. They can go from that kind of freedom into really lockdowns, extreme tyranny, which they're experiencing over there. And I think Americans have had a taste of it here as well. Now, you've studied communism extensively. So how do you make sense of what's happening in the world right now? Because I think that this is the journey a lot of people are going on, is just realizing it's this process of, some might call it being red pill, but I call it just realizing the truth. And there's people that I think had a very comfortable life for a very long time that are now waking up to this reality that, wait, there's actually some sort of enemy that's against mankind. There's some sort of force out there. And they might go and they do their research, and maybe they find out, oh, it's the cabal, it's the bloodlines, it's the deep state. But I find that not a lot of people end up being led back to communism, which, I've researched extensively a lot of this stuff, whether it's reading, the books on the Committee of 300 or, Behold a Pale Horse. And there's a lot of information out there. But I find that the people that are able to connect the dots back to communism consistently seem to be the most accurate. So, in your view, what's behind what we're experiencing in America as an example? What forces behind the taking away of our freedoms and our country plunging into what seems to be a frightful, path to perhaps tyranny?
Well, my journey started first looking at China. And that has led me to the conclusions that about what's happening in the US. And I've spent the past decade or more researching, and a really lot of it happened through my film work. So I've been a filmmaker, video producer for almost 25 years now. That's what I've always done professionally. But after my experience inside China, inside a basement prison cell, that's when I really got a taste eye to eye with the propaganda techniques that are used, the manipulation that's used, the result of brainwashing on citizens was just really, really shocking. And so I was arrested for holding a banner on Tiananmen Square, and the word I was holding when I was surrounded by these plainclothes police was the word compassion.
What a
Essentially,
terrible word to hold up. I mean, you should have been thrown into prison. I'm surprised they even let you out for that.
can you believe it? Can you believe it? One word, compassion. It was in Chinese too. It's not that they didn't understand it, right? So I'm holding the word compassion, and these, I'm 6 foot, I'm pretty tall, and these quite short undercover police officers, because they were in plain clothes, most of them, surrounded and assaulted and thrown into a van within 30 seconds, literally, of putting that banner up. But this banner said compassion. And as they were edging closer and closer to me, I looked over the banner and I saw what I was holding. And was exactly what they were arresting me for. And they told me, this is illegal in China. The rest of the banner had truth, compassion, and tolerance on them, but I was holding the word compassion, and they told me those words are illegal in China. So that set me on this journey of, I thought I understood communism. I thought I understood the crimes of communism. I thought I'd uncovered what was going on in China. I saw myself as a bit of a China expert. But when you have that when you go face to face with that, then you start to realize there's another psychological element that is much more perverse and goes a lot deeper. And then, so that led me to future films that I have since made. You mentioned they were on the Rise TV platform, and you can watch them. They were very proud that Rise TV has been one of the many platforms that have been willing to show our movies. And Rise TV, right from the get-go, said straight away, we want these movies. And so one of them, the most recent one, is called Finding Courage. And for that movie, I interviewed people who survived communism. I've interviewed more than 100 survivors of communist tyranny, mostly from China, but also from other parts of the world. And what I found is that the victims cannot answer the questions that I really wanted to know. And as much as I heard again and again these just horrific, tragic stories, and sometimes triumph as well, where people had healed, but I needed to speak to perpetrators. I needed to understand what makes them tick. Why do they do what they do? Why do they cooperate? Why do they give up their values? And so I started to interview people who were members of the regime, high-ranking officials, including a former army colonel, former police chief in Beijing, China's capital city, police commissioner, and a man who ran not just one slave labor prison camp in China, but multiple. And these people told me things that I really, they say, you Americans, you cannot, you're too kind. You cannot understand evil. And if you cannot understand evil, you will never understand what we've been through until you go through it yourself. So the people in China have been through communist tyranny for more than 70 years. They've experienced such psychological, horrific operations, such as the Cultural Revolution. The pressure upon the citizens during that time was so extreme that families were turning on families, culture was destroyed, everything was broken, and there was nothing left to fill that hole for people, because culture and tradition and religion and spirituality was essentially destroyed at that point. So when you look, I like to look at China. I think in America, we need to look at China as the worst case example for what could be and the trajectory where we're going. And looking at Australia, it has been leaning toward the Chinese path, the Chinese communist cultural path. And Americans are looking at Australia and saying, why are you giving in to tyranny? Because Australia hasn't been through that type of operation before either. So they didn't know. We have the benefit of knowing. And when you connect the dots back and you start to look at the international socialist movement, I've gone back through it, even before Karl Marx, but studying especially from Karl Marx up to today, there is a timeline going all the way through Soviet times, going through Chinese Communist Party times, going through World War II, all the way to infiltration into America, subversion here into this system, intentional subversion. They have a very long-term plan, and they haven't hidden it, but they have deceived us. And that's where so many people, as you said, they're waking up now from this level of comfort. That level of comfort is something that we've been pushed into because we've had information controlled. We haven't been allowed to see certain things, and we've been told that's a conspiracy. Don't touch that. A conspiracy is a legal term. People are arrested for conspiracy to crime every year. It's a serious term. But we've been conditioned to think conspiracy is something crazy. What is that? How did we get to this point? You follow back through the international socialist movement. Socialism is communism. You really cannot separate the two. And China is the largest regime now, but you can see, you follow the money, you follow the political and psychological operations, and you get back to the international socialist movement. And I'm not the first one to say it. There are so many people, when you look through America's history, so many brave people have published books, published studies. They have done so much to reveal this truth that it's taken a shakeup such as COVID to make so many of us wake up from this comfort that we've been put into and say, what the heck is going on? What am I going to do about it? First
It's a
step
good
is
point.
realize. Yeah.
Well, and you and I were speaking on the phone yesterday and kind of talking through some of the show, and you made a really good point, and this is something I've experienced too. Say a year and a half ago, if I was creating a thumbnail for the show, I probably wouldn't put CCP on the thumbnail because a lot of people wouldn't recognize what the CCP meant. But now CCP is just, it's common knowledge. You hear it on Fox News, you hear everyone talking about it. So people are really waking up to what's happening. Now, and Kate, if it's okay with you, I want to take a short break to play the trailer for your documentary, which I think that people really should see the trailer, but they should also realize that the documentary is available to watch on Rise TV. So let's go. I'm going to go and pull this up now. And I really want to play this documentary trailer because this is an incredible documentary, which I encourage that everyone watch. Let's pull this up now.
There's an old Chinese saying my ancestors learned before the Communist Party took over our country. The family is the essential unit of human society, and that you must have honor and defend your family. But it's not always easy to do.
When the regime gives the order, you have to kill.
My heart was pounding. I felt my body bouncing and twisting on the floor. They put numbers on our shoulders, then separated us into rows of even and odd numbers. I was number 9. My brother, he's still in prison, and my sister, she was sent to a labor camp without a trial. But there's one piece of evidence they haven't been able to destroy yet. I left everything behind. If I can't expose what they did to us, then all of our suffering would be for nothing.
Incredible. So just give us a brief overview of that documentary, because I think that, and that documentary, I think, will become a good transition in our conversation because, you've done other documentaries, one of the other ones specifically called Hard to Believe, which was really exposing the organ trade in China and forced organ harvesting. And that's a topic that I've covered. I've interviewed Dr. Vertodi, right, who was a surgeon that fled China, and he broke down in tears on the interview, and it was an incredible show talking about forced organ harvesting. And we chose not to go that route with the interview today because we really wanted to find the angle of hope and courage. So tell us a little bit about that documentary and why you called it Finding Courage, because I think right now a lot of people are trying to find their courage in the face of the evil today.
Exactly, for that reason. And well, for 2 reasons. One is that, yes, we need to have a level of positivity. We have to have that, not just hope. We need hopeful action, and we need hopeful hearts. We need hopeful minds. We need hopeful people. It's really critical because that's what tyranny wants to break down. But the other reason is the basic reason that it is that story. That's what the story is. So Finding Courage is a story of a woman and her family. So 3 siblings were arrested in China, but 3 different fates. One was put into a slave labor camp and killed within 4 months. Her body still remains at the morgue to this day, more than 16 years later. And people say to me, how is that possible? Well, that's the first question I asked myself when I found that, because I'm like, it's not possible. I got undercover footage from inside the labor camp, admissions from the labor camp director saying that it is possible, that she's paying for that every month. So we have amazing undercover footage inside this movie that people risk their lives for. They had such courage. Man, these are really gutsy people in this movie. And so that was what happened to one sibling. Another sibling from this family that the story's about spent 13 years in prison for printing flyers. So when people say to me, look at what's happening to Americans being targeted here, I say, yes, learn from the example of China and don't let this continue here, because we can see what happens. A man, now in his 60s, was arrested and put into prison for 13 years for printing flyers. I saw the legal documents signed by and stamped by the Chinese Communist Party, and lawyers were threatened if they represented him that they would lose their legal license to practice. And the third family member was our main character in the movie. She escaped because her husband is an absolutely gutsy guy, and so is she. She's a very gutsy gal. But they were able to come to America. And what they've been able to reveal as actually they're high-profile journalists in China. They have special access to information and the officialdom that others don't have. So not everyone gets this story out. Not everyone can do what they've done, but we can really, really learn a lot from them. And the other people that you saw in the trailer, you might have seen there was some men sitting against a black background. Those were the officials that are in my book, the Chinese Communist Party officials, and I wrote a book about their stories. They're the ones who really said what is going on inside China, what they have to do, basically lie, cheat, steal, kill, torture, hurt, harm. That's what they have to do. That's what they've become in China. So all of them found courage, and I felt I had to find courage too to finish the movie, and it took us 6 years to make, but I wanted it to be entertaining. I wanted to make sure that people would feel something, connect to something, but I didn't want it to be manipulative, because I'm very aware of media manipulation, propaganda techniques, very sensitive to that, and I want to use the skills that I have for good. And so I made that extra effort in this movie to check off everything, but also make it entertaining. And if I may, Seth, give a little plug, that film is actually playing in Ohio at the end of this month at it's the American President's Film and Literary Festival. So I know that's your backyard. So just thought I'd mention that too. It's just great that it's being, that Americans can use this as an example for, we don't want to go that way. Let's learn from that and change our trajectory.
And that is such an important point too, because we've got examples of this. And I think that, those who don't understand their history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that it's very important, even though in America, we've experienced some level of tyranny here throughout our history. That was what the founding fathers were fighting up against. But it's nothing like having a Bolshevik revolution or having Red Guards, break down our doors and take us away and string us to a tree or whatever, the folks experience in communist regimes around the world. But it's also important because we can learn from these cultures, and not just what they went through, and not just learning about the pain and what happened with famine, control the food supply, the stripping of their guns, et cetera. But we can also learn how they got through it. And that's a really, really important point. And something that I've always enjoyed, in our conversations, is that I look at you as a modern day Joost Meerloo, right? So Joost Meerloo is the author of the book Rape of the Mind. And I did a specific show on that, and it was an incredible book. And so he was a psychoanalyst, a Dutch psychoanalyst that during the period of World War II became very obsessed with understanding what really became, and I think what he was people that coined it, this mass formation psychosis, understanding how people can be manipulated into being pawns of an evil regime, and how someone that would have been, say, a lawyer in Germany could have become an SS guard that was pulling the switch on the gas chambers. And he really looked at he looked at the specifics, but it was not just that, it was the bigger picture of the human psychology of it. And that's what's always fascinated me with your work, is that you really look at not just the minutia, right? Like I have Jeff Nyquist on quite often, who is an expert on understanding the minutia of communism. And he can say, well, I talked to this person in 1988 who revealed to me this plan of the Soviets, which is very, very important. I'll be interviewing him again soon for an update on what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, China, et cetera. But you look at the psychology of it, and not just the psychology of this battle against communism and tyranny, but the spiritual aspect of it. And I want to read, so you recently or you're actually in the process of releasing a new book, right? Which I believe is available as an ebook format right now, which I'll pull this up for our audience to see, called Nowhere Left to Run, 10 Steps to Survive Tyranny Today. And I printed off part of it because you sent it to me, and I printed off two paragraphs that I want to read because this really deserves us digging into in this. So you say in their book, despite their 100 plus years of developing and testing psychological and economic tools and techniques to manipulate and direct the stories we share, the history we remember, the products we buy, and the money we spend, they still cannot understand or replicate the miraculous nature of our brains and the spiritual depth and strength of our heart and soul. If those aspects of us are not human-made, how can they be broken or recreated by humans? So tyrannists use another way. They make us forget that, ultimately, we are not human-made. Their base, brutish methods rely on wearing us down, tiring us out, filling us with stress, fear, even terror until we break and succumb to their control. They confuse, distract, and make us anxious to forget that each and every one of us are infused with miraculous physical, mental, and spiritual strength and regenerative healing abilities that are beyond the reach of tyranny. And I just thought that was such an incredible point that you made in this, because, and this is what they don't want us to know. And, when we were planning out the discussion today, or, the other day, and I was talking to you, this is what I really honed in on, is that this is the secret that the elites don't want us to know. And it's really two. It's one, that they don't want us to know how powerful that we are, especially when we connect with God and we understand the true human potential. But two, they don't want us to know that they're actually afraid of us. And so I want to talk a lot about this, actually. I want to spend a good part of this interview digging into this. But first off, you had mentioned that you were going to offer the Man in America audience members the ebook for free. Is that correct? And how can they go about getting that?
Yes, that's correct. And I know, because Seth, seeing your show, I feel like you understand this type of topic. And I've had people say to me, Kay, we need aggressive solutions. And I say, no, we don't. We need strong solutions, but we need brave solutions, but we don't need to get aggressive and hateful and angry, because that's exactly what they want us to do. They want us to lose our cool. And so what I wanted to do for the Man in America audience, and thank you for the opportunities, I wanted to make this ebook available early. I haven't released it yet, but I'm releasing it with you, pre-releasing it with you and your audience today. So for anyone who wants a copy of it, please go to my website. That's my name, kayrubacek.com, KAYRUBACEK.com. Just go to the contact page, send me your email, and I will send you the ebook directly to you, because I really appreciate you, and I appreciate, Seth, everything you do, because I know that I just knew you would someone who would be able to understand that, help me get that point across, that really we can do this, and we there's all the evidence to prove that. And that's what I've really tried to put into this book. And I tried to keep it short. Don't expect a long read. My last book was 300 pages, but this one, I can put it out for free because I'm an independent creator. So that's where I'm allowed to do that. I can set my own rules on this for this. So, I know a publisher would have wanted me to push this to 300 pages, but then how many people are going to read it? So seriously, you can read this. It'll be a shorter read. It's 10 Steps to Survive Tyranny Today. And if you go to my website, send me an email, I will send it to you free of charge.
And just to restate it, folks, the website is kayrubacek.com. So it's KAYRUBACEK.com. And on there, you can find a link for contact. And if you shoot Kay an email and say, hey, Seth told me you'd give me a free book, then she will give you a free book. So let's go ahead and dig into this, because I'm very fascinated with the research that you've done and how you presented it in the book, that it's not just about, here's what's happening to us in America, or here's the global tyranny or the great reset that's happening, but it's how we can fight back. And it's reminding us of who we are. So why don't you just talk about some of the key points that you've really put into this book? Because it's such a helpful book.
Sure. Someone said to me, well, it's like exposing communism, but with a bit of self-help in there. It's really not about that. Tyranny really is targeting us psychologically through mental manipulation, through media mouthpieces. They've proven this all around the world. They've tested and honed their skills very, very well. And they're using that on us. They also control us through our pocketbooks, through economics. These are the two main aspects. And that's what anyone that I've talked to has found, that they're going to come back to that when you start on your, whether it's awakening journey or red pill journey, or however you have come to understand this, you end up finding that there is a level of deceit. People are lying to you. People don't want you to know what's really going on in the world around you. And they start to make you compromise. They start to make you feel like you don't know what's going on in the world. And economically, we see this happening all the time. We've seen our money being taken advantage of. Our monetary system has been targeted over the last 100 years, very specifically. And I think a lot of people are exposing that really quite well. And so many people are waking up to that. But I feel we have to find the solutions to these problems, and really going back and studying the textbooks from the Soviets especially, but seeing more from people like Juice Myrlu and others who have done these studies into people who've been brainwashed, victims who've been brainwashed, and myself interviewing the people that I've interviewed who have been subject to tyranny and torture. There's common things. And what I found is that there are so many ways, and I've narrowed it down to 10. I've been able to sum them all up into 10 steps. And so that's where you have the strength in yourself. One of the steps is the family. So everyone says, well, they're targeting the family. Yes, they are. Why? What we forget and what we're not taught is that the family, we say it's the basic unit of society. Yes, it is. But it is the biggest roadblock between you and tyrannical control, because all the institutions, they can be corrupted through money. And you look at the monopolies that are running the world today and running our government and through the nation, they are largely controlled by corporate interests and lobbying groups and monopolies. But the family is a family unit built on human beings, not built on money. It's built on some sort of miraculous concept where a baby is born into a family and given to a set of parents, a mother and a father. And siblings don't choose which sibling they get. Parents don't choose which baby they get. There's just this miracle that ends up on your lap and in your family. That is something that tyrannists cannot explain, and they can never recreate that. That's one example of what the concept you were talking about, Seth. And what I've found is really through studying others that have already done so much work into this, we can see that why they target the family. If they can break down the family and separate parents from their children and have the state controlling the education of the children and their welfare, health, I'm saying that in quotation marks for anyone listening on a podcast, because the welfare that we think, or the healthcare that we think our children need, may not be what the state is expecting. When they break down that family unit, not only do children become subject to the state, and we can see this in China over generations, they have become, they now see the Chinese Communist Party as their mother/father figure. They have that instilled in them. And we forget our history. We forget our past because we don't respect our elders anymore. Children are being taught that they are the brains of the world, and that experience, wisdom, maturity don't matter. And then they can separate from history. So many people say to me, why are children not respecting their parents? Why are children not wanting to read history? This is part of the socialist plan. This is exactly what they do. If they can separate us from our families, they can separate us from our history. They're killing two birds with one stone. That's one example that I go into in my book, because that is a fundamental roadblock. So that's a problem. Sure, that's a problem. Solution is work hard on your family. It is a challenge, because it's family, it's human relations, and human relations are hard. But when you get through those challenges together with people who you didn't choose, your parents who didn't choose, of course they wanted you, but they didn't choose you. And same as the siblings, when you work within that unit, you overcome things. And that is when you get this strength that you can overcome anything. And people who have suffered brainwashing, it's been proven time and time again in studies that those who had strong family ties were the very hardest to brainwash, because they knew someone in the world needed them and they were worth waiting for and surviving for. So we need to really not just say the family unit matters, but we need to take action for the family unit to strengthen it, to turn the screens off when you really have that family get together. Make everyone leave their phone at the door, even just for an hour. Look at each other, spend time together. These are basic things that can actually rebuild not only our communities, but society, because it is the biggest roadblock for tyranny. And that's one of the points I go into in my book.
And that point is also one of the points I think was so strongly made in Juice Merlou's book, Rape of the Mind, that the people that were able to withstand the brainwashing and not actually fall into that trap were the ones that had these strong family units. And you bring up a really important point, because there is a strong push, especially within the conservative movement within our country, to get the kids out of schools, homeschool, get very involved in the education, which I think is so incredibly important. But I think that that's only one part of strengthening the family unit. How many of us have parents that we don't talk to very often? How many of us have siblings we don't talk to very often? And a lot of times it's because maybe there is this quarrel or this misunderstanding, or just, we have different political views that happened and it gradually separated us from our families. But I think that right now is the time that we have to really, really work hard to reunite and bring our families together. So there's a lot of people that are watching the show that maybe they say, well, yeah, but my kids are already graduated from high school and they're on to college, or, they say, well, I'm already homeschooling, and great. There's always so much more that we can do. And I'd ask those same people, when was the last time that you called your mom, right? When was the last time that you had your parents over or had your sister over? And it's something that I've seen. It's been amazing because, my wife and I, she fell pregnant right as COVID was starting to hit. It was at the very beginning that we discovered we're going to have this beautiful little girl that came into our lives. And so at that time, we made the decision to move back to my home state of Ohio. We were living in a high-rise building in New York City, which is the last place I want to be during a COVID apocalypse, but also it's so far from the values. And so we moved back, and I've seen over the past couple of years, we've really tried to build relationships with our close family. And I've seen how much strength that we've gained from having this family close. And I just think that it's such a precious thing. And I'm so glad that that was the first point that you brought up, because I think we need to have that reminder of that. Now, another point I want to get to, in your book, and you address this, but, for people that fear, that feel a sense of fear towards this, and this is also part of the tricky part, is that in this process of realizing that there is this global, group of evil people that want to destroy humankind and depopulate the earth, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but actually you start looking into it and it really starts to make sense. And it's easy, though, for people to go through this journey of feeling like, gosh, there's so much evil on this earth and they're so powerful. And the more you research, the more you realize they've been controlling things for a really, really long time. But you make an important point in this book in talking about the importance of not fearing them, but also realizing that they fear us. They fear our potential. They fear us finding out their plans. And there's actually the document you sent me this morning, which was part of I think it was part of an educational class for socialists in the Lenin Institute, I believe, over in Soviet Union, that talking about how basically they, or I think it was this is previous Soviet Union, they revealed that if the people they're targeting discover their plans and their plans of subversion, that it could thwart their entire plan. So I'd love to hear you talk about when you say that they fear us. Explain that. Give us some hope and let us know exactly why these evil people are shaking in their boots at the American people and the people across the world that see through them.
It's the most important thing, really. That's when this is something that I've just found consistently again and again and again. And when you're facing, as you said, people, there's so much darkness when you start researching in this, when you realize that things aren't what you were told and that you may have been wrong in your thinking. It's a sense of betrayal. I felt a sense of betrayal that I wasn't taught the full history of things in school, and that in college I received an education that was actually twisting history and intentionally trying to pervert my understanding away from a sense of truth. And I felt betrayed by that. And then and listening to really hundreds of hours of witness testimonies, people telling me what they've been through under communist tyranny and torture, it's such a weight. And I've spent years in sort of that dark side of things, and it's very heavy. But coming out on the other side of that, that's where I truly hold that hope, and I've held that for quite some time now, and it's consistent with all my studies. That's why I say it with my own such conviction, but really based on so many other people's works as well as my own. And they rely, and when I say they, I'm talking about tyranny, and tyranny, you can include the globalists in there, monopolists, socialism, communism, Leninism, Marxism, all those isms. Exactly, all these isms trying to confuse us, right? Their doctrine relies on deception, lies, and cheating. Now, is that what you want? I think there's good people in the world who don't want that. And there's so many of us who have been cheated. And when you realize that you've been lied to, that's uncomfortable. You may feel a sense of betrayal. And some people feel angry. I've felt angry. But they want us to be afraid. And so when you turn on the TV news, I had some TV news on last night, checking the latest headlines. They had on replay brutal beatings across America. And they kept replaying the footage. And my husband said, "Oh, I feel uncomfortable. This is scary." I said, "That's exactly what they want you to think." And this wasn't even CNN. This was Fox TV. This was Fox News. So our media, they have just come to follow these rules of the socialists to make us fear. And they are not prefacing things and saying, "Get ready for this. This is going to be horrific." No, they're just slamming it right at you, desensitizing you, and playing it again and again and again, and repeat. You cannot help but on your phone to see violent or sexual images. They just pop up without any preparation. So you just get used to it. This is what they do in brainwashing techniques. They want to instill fear, because if they can instill fear, confusion, distraction, then they can get us to hatred and anger. And then we're completely manipulatable. And your mind is easily subject to manipulation when you're in a state of fear. But that's where, if we can start to recognize when we're feeling afraid and start to just be more, take a step back instead of digging into that fear and shaking in your boots, because it's hard. I know it's hard. But remember, they want you to fear. They rely on that because the truth can bring their whole, the truth is what will bring their whole infrastructure down, because it is completely based on lies and deception. And they say that themselves in their own textbooks and training and speeches and manuals and things that you can study for the last century. They know that our sense of humanity, our spirit, our will to be good can just destroy everything that they have, because that is the truth. There is a truth there. And they are not, their foundation is not based on truth at all. And when you understand that, then you start to recognize, like, why are they lying to me all the time? And then you see those lies. And so I've switched my thinking. Instead of seeing these tyrannical leaders in their big, scary paraphernalia and clothes and red lights and dark rooms and everything, I've started thinking of them more like you're a parent, Seth. You've had, I'm sure you may have seen a tantrum or two. I think most parents out there have seen a tantrum. You've seen a tantrum from a kid. The more we wake up, the more tyranny goes crazy, because they have to try and suppress our knowledge of the truth and keep their lies going. So I tend to look at their craziness as, okay, as a mother, I've 2 kids, I've seen a lot of tantrums. The more calm you are as a parent when the tantrum's going on, the more you can take it lightly, but you have to hold them to account. You have to teach the kids that you've done something wrong. I cannot reward you for that. If you keep rewarding bad behavior, or you cannot complain later on when your kid continues bad behavior. That bad behavior has to be punished, but you can do that in a calm way. And that's where I think we need to be at, because tyranny wants us to lose our cool, go crazy, start reacting, cause trouble so that they can just start putting people into jail and start backing up their lies. If we believe their lies, or if we sort of start to fall into if we fall into their baiting us for hating and fighting, we're going to get straight into that.
Oh, yeah.
But if we can recognize they are desperately trying to cover their tracks, they're desperately trying to get us to believe their lies and just get overwhelmed by hatred and anger, then the more we pull back and say, not taking that, we're not accepting that, this is not on, we know the truth and we're going to stand by it, they have nothing to fall back on. They have no plan B.
No, I agree.
That's it.
And actually, so that reminds me of a quote that I read that I want to read to you really quick, because it's a very, very powerful quote. So, and it goes, one basic truth can be used as a foundation for a mountain of lies. And if we dig down deep enough in the mountain of lies and bring out that truth to set it on top of the mountain of lies, the entire mountain of lies will crumble under the weight of that one truth. And there is nothing more devastating to a structure of lies than the revelation of the truth upon which the structure of lies was built, because the shock waves of the revelation of the truth reverberate and continue to reverberate throughout the earth for generations to follow, awakening even those people who had no desire to be awakened to the truth. That's from Delamer Duveris. I read that quote, I think it was at the beginning of Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. And I remember that always stuck with me, just the analogy of like that one truth can collapse a mountain of lies. So Kay, we're going to quickly, I've got a few sponsors I want to talk about quickly, and then we'll get back into the interview. And then shortly we'll be going over to Rise TV for the Q&A portion of the interview. So let me go ahead and jump to that really quickly now. So folks, by now we all sense that we are in for a bumpy ride for the foreseeable future. If you look what's happening, things are really heating up over with Russia and Ukraine, which I'll be covering tomorrow. So much of the world, though, is going through a process that experts are calling de-dollarization. So what exactly does this mean? You see, the US dollar is a fiat currency, meaning it isn't backed by anything of real value. Nixon removed the gold standard in the early 70s. The only thing that gives our dollar real value is its demand around the world. But now, especially under the corrupt and incompetent Biden regime, the rest of the world is fed up with the Federal Reserve printing money out of thin air and demanding to trade it for things of real value. So this is why Russia has already backed its currency with gold, and many other nations are following. But what happens if the dollar loses its global reserve status? Well, for most of us Americans, the US dollar is all we know, right? All of our hard-earned money is completely tied to it, whether it's to the stock market, our bank accounts, pensions, 401ks, etc. The value of our dollars, our life savings, could literally be wiped out in a matter of months, weeks, or even overnight. And look, I'm not a financial advisor, so please do your own research. But I believe that now more than ever, it's a good time to consider transferring at least some of your wealth into physical gold and silver, real world assets that have stood the test of time. And for this, I'm confident recommending Noble Gold. You can buy gold and silver directly, or you can even transfer your IRA into physical gold and silver with zero taxes or penalties. And most importantly, you can trust Noble Gold with your wealth. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and hundreds upon hundreds of positive reviews from folks like you that they've helped out. Now, look, I want to be really clear though. You don't buy gold and silver to get rich. You do it to protect your wealth, especially amidst times of collapse or crisis. But if things really do get tough, history's left us many stories of folks scooping up land and other valuable assets for a few gold coins. So now's the time, folks. If you want to learn more about this, open up a new tab right now and go to goldwithseth.com, or you can just call 877-646-5347 to speak to someone on the phone right now. Again, that's 877-646-5347. Also, folks, I have a quick other message. I'm sure a lot of you own a home. Well, the deed to your homes is the only document that proves that you own it. So the problem is the deeds to our homes are all online now. So this means that a criminal can find your deed, forge your signature, and refile as the new owner of your home. Then he can actually take out loans using your home's equity and leave you in debt. FBI reports show that real estate fraud is one of the fastest growing cybercrimes in America. It's already costing Americans massive amounts of money. And unfortunately, you won't know until collection notices show up on loans that you yourself never took out. Homeowners insurance doesn't even cover you, and neither do common identity theft programs. Home Title Lock is your peace of mind. The deed to your home is protected, where you can protect your home equity and title for just pennies a day. So to learn more, go to hometitlelock.com/Seth and use promo code Seth, S-E-T-H, that's me. Then enter your address for your no obligation home title scan to see if you're already a victim. It's a $100 value for free. So be sure to use the promo code Seth for your free title scan at hometitlelock.com. Again, that's hometitlelock.com/Seth. All right, back into our discussion. So Kay, as we're talking here about fear, can you just quickly give me a brief overview of the document that you sent me this morning, where it's almost like written proof that they know if we find out their plans, that can be what undoes everything that they're working towards.
Yes, I sure can. And I would like to read that for you, actually. Can I just bring that up here? So this document came from it was published in 1933, and this was a textbook used. Now, I'm going to mention the term psychopolitics. It's not something that we hear about too often, but it's this psychology, using psychology to take control over, well, essentially over a nation. And so this quote that I sent to you came from this textbook, and the introduction was given by a Soviet leader, Beria, and he was the chief of Soviet security and secret police under Joseph Stalin, one of the world's worst mass murderers we've ever seen, and during Soviet times. And so he gave this speech, and he said himself, in the speech, he says, "American students at the Lenin University, I welcome your attention at these classes on psychopolitics." He explained psychopolitics as being beyond geopolitics and really looking at how to take control of a nation to achieve Soviet goals, to achieve socialist goals. And these haven't changed. And I'm just adding in a note here is that, and I'll read some of these, just a couple of points from this in a second, but someone may have said in the past, I know this document was brought up in the 50s and again in the 60s and 70s, and many authorities, I say that with quotation marks, had said, well, this is controversial. We don't know. And they tried to fabricate and say this is not a correct document. But now we have the benefit of hindsight. For, this was almost 100 years ago this was published. And if you read this document, this whole document on brainwashing and psychopolitics, then you can just read it at face value and just look at it. And that's what I did.
It was chilling when I read it. It was almost prophetic. It was stirring when I read through that document you sent me.
Yes, you can just see that this is what's happened. So, okay, so basically the purpose of psychopolitics, he says, is to produce a maximum of chaos in the culture of the enemy is our first most important step.
Sounds
our
like
fruits
America
are grown.
today.
Exactly. And America is their enemy. And America was their enemy then too. We got to remember that their goals are long term. It's not like America was suddenly their enemy in the last decade or 2 years ago. No, this is not a new plan that we're within. This is not a new battle. This is an old battle, and we're just waking up to it. So people that are just waking up to it now, you can follow this back. We've been in this for a very long time. And so they're in this speech, think when he says enemy, he's talking about America. And he says, this is Lavrenti Beria. He's saying, our fruits are grown in chaos, distrust, economic depression, and scientific turmoil. Think about that, right? We're seeing all these things around us.
Scientific turmoil.
This is their intention. And he also says, at least a weary populace can seek peace only in our offered communist state, as communism can only resolve the problems of the masses. So this is where they want us to be tired, and I talk about this in depth in my book. They want us to be tired, stressed out, anxious, fearful, scared. They want us to just give up and give in and see that there is nothing else. In China, this is what's happened. The Chinese people have believed, they still believe, that there is no alternative to the Chinese Communist Party, because that's what they've been told for the last 70 years. And if we believe that socialism is inevitable, then they win. And so I'll read another point here. So Lavrenti Beria says, you must labor until we have dominion over the minds and bodies of every important person in your nation. Remember, he's talking to American students, your nation. And he says, you can cripple the efficiency of leaders by striking insanity into their families through the use of drugs. The drug wars that we're seeing on the border, I've been to the border and I've done documentaries on the border crisis here in the US. It is not a coincidence. This is intentional, and it's been going on for a long time. They know the power of getting people addicted to drugs, and they use it. He says, you can alter forever the loyalty of a soldier in our hands, or a statesman, or a leader in his own country, or you can destroy his mind. And the textbook, this is the introduction to the textbook, and the textbook goes into the details of that. It is a horrific read. Don't read it before going to bed. Let's put it that way. I studied it very closely, and I found others that corroborate with all of the information in this textbook. But let me end on this paragraph. He says, however, you labor under certain dangers. It may happen that remedies for our, he has in quotation mark, treatments may be discovered. But should they occur, should independent researchers actually discover means to undo psychopolitical procedures, you must not rest, you must not eat or sleep, you must not stint one tiniest bit of available money to campaign against it, discredit it, strike it down, or render it void. For by an effective means, all our actions and researches could be undone. They knew this. They've known this for a very, very long time. That was 1933, taught to American students on Soviet soil. And they've continued their studies. They've continued their teachings. And the operations we see today, the tactics that we see on the surface here in the US, critical race theory, sexualization of children, all of these things are stuff on the surface. But that you can trace it back to the roots of this intention to control us through psychology, manipulation, and economics.
Which makes a very important point, because if you go back to that document and you realize that is this is their way of waging war. Now, I've talked about, I had General Robert Spalding on. We talked about unrestricted warfare, right, where the Chinese are basically saying that anything goes to fight war and that war has changed. But for over 100 years now, they have been fighting this war through information, right? Which really highlights the importance of what you're doing as, say, a documentary filmmaker, where you've created documentaries, which they're phenomenal, and I highly recommend that everyone watch Kay's documentaries. And again, they're over on Rise TV. You can watch them. There's a free trial link in the description below. But again, that's just one way that you've been fighting. I know you've won tons of film festival awards, and probably millions of people have seen the documentaries that you've produced, because this is how we're fighting. you and I, let's just say if this was, say, 1776, we'd probably both be on the front lines, or maybe you'd be a nurse because they probably wouldn't have allowed you on the front lines with a musket at that time. But this is the war that we're now fighting, which it really goes. And I believe that a lot of the people that are watching, and this is the sense that I've gotten from the audience, that they also believe that we're in war, and they believe it's an information war. And so a lot of them have been doing everything they can to share videos like this, right? To share trailers for the documentaries you produce, to share information to help their friends and family, because that right there is the greatest weakness, right, that we can capitalize on of the enemies, is the fact that their entire plan is propped up based upon lies and deception. And the more people that see through the lies and deception, the more people will then free themselves from that, and they will collapse. The evil people will collapse. And that is, that is such an important point to really let hit home, because if all of us can just stay calm and collected, especially when we're talking to our liberal neighbors that scream at us, or our parents that want to go get their booster shot, or whatever it is, we have to just stay calm and collected and share with them and talk to them and bring them closer through our kindness. It's really, it's almost laughable, but something even more than that, that they arrested you in China for holding up a banner that said compassion. Like, that should show you how scared they are of our compassion. And so let that be a good lesson for us. Like, let's put that into our arsenal. Let's put that into our ammo clip, is just our compassion, because obviously they're scared of it.
And when they were so scared of little old me with my single character that says compassion, that not only did they put me in a prison cell for a bit, but they got me out of there as quickly as possible. They took me through a quiet route through the back of the airport so that I couldn't call out any truths to any more Chinese citizens, so that I couldn't hold any banner to anyone. And they even bought my plane ticket back to Australia. I had a return flight paid for by myself to return it in a few days. They were trying to get me to buy a return flight, and I said, no, I'm not going to. They tried to get me to sign papers that I couldn't read. It's in Chinese. I wasn't going to sign any papers. And they are so afraid of people like us just saying, no, you're lying. I won't do that. That what did they do? They bought me a plane ticket and got me out of their country as fast as they could before I could tell any more truths to any more Chinese people. That's what they are afraid of. So that's another example that really just hit home for me. It's like, not only are they afraid of the word compassion, they're afraid of someone who's going to say it and someone who's going to stand up for it. And so it's not that we just all go and sit back and be calm and everything's going to be fine. We still have to, I really think we have to work on ourselves, like to recognize what's going on around us and be able to share the information, but understand it and start talking about it. And we all have to be able to do that. We don't need to have, you take the information that you get from shows like this, and then you start to work on how to talk about it yourself, how to be like that yourself, so that we need to, everyone's saying, well, we've got to try and change the big federal government. Don't rely on big government. You have to get that out of your head, that everything is dependent on big government changing. It's not. That is a manipulation, mental manipulation, that makes you feel helpless, hopeless, stupid. They want us to think that we are not capable of running our own families, our own communities, and our own nation. We've got to prove them wrong by taking back control in the small units, our own families, and that will grow. And don't put all your hope in the federal government, because that's exactly what they want. They want to just block it off and say, we'll take care of that. Well, we know what will happen if we allow that. And that's where we have to really say no, with calmness, with rationality, but we've got to say no.
Absolutely. And it's actually, once you do it a few times, it becomes empowering. You're just like, nope, not doing it. It's like, I remember when I was walking to grocery stores, they're like, where's your mask? I'm like, sorry, not going to wear it. And they don't know how to react to it. They're just like, okay. And I just keep going. So, all right. So, Kay, we're now going to jump over to Rise TV only for the Q&A, but I just want to tell the audience to make sure they go to your website, K Rubacek. It's RUBA, right? CEK.com. And just click on that contact form, shoot Kay an email, get your free copy of that book. It's a really short read. It's like I think less than 40 pages, but it's so well done. It's just jam-packed full of information. Kay, is there anywhere else that people can follow you or find you, or where are you most active on social media?
Fortunately, I'm still on a bunch of platforms, and I took 5 years off basically to just switch off from social media, and that was a real blessing, I have to say. And I've just started getting back on and building up again. So I have been shadow banned on a bunch of platforms, but you can find me. I really say email me, send me an email. That is my you're always guaranteed that you can get my email. So that is the best place to connect with me there. But you can also find me on Twitter, Telegram, not Telegram yet, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So I'm still on those platforms now, though. But email is guaranteed. We can still get through.
And as soon as you have your Telegram up and ready to go, I'll make sure to share it, because I've got a pretty active following on there, and they're always asking me, Seth, where can I follow this person? So as soon as you're ready to go, we'll get you out on Telegram, and hopefully, a lot of the folks that are watching will come follow you, because they should.
Great.
And also just a reminder, folks, that, not when you come join us on Rise TV, I mean, you're really supporting what we're doing in our fight against the information war with Rise TV. So come join us, for the rest of the show. We're going to have the Q&A with Kay. And also after the Q&A, you can then go and watch her documentaries. We have Finding Courage, and also Is Hard to Believe still up on Rise.
Yes, still there. Yep.
So we have two fantastic, A-list quality. These are like Dinesh D'Souza level documentaries. If you've seen his 2000 Mules, for instance, they're really at that level. They're so well done. So come over on Rise TV, check those out, share them with your friends and family. But we're now going to be jumping into the Q&A. And if you want to join us, again, in the description below the video is a link for a free trial. So sayonara to all the folks on the public platforms. Dom, you can go ahead and cut the feeds to the Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, etc., and we can dive into the Q&A. So Kay, let me go ahead and pull up my questions here. And actually, it's okay. Here we got a good one to start. So this is from the Kick and Cabals Daily, which is one of my favorite names on here, who says, Kay, what small changes do you see every day in Australia which pushes your country further towards communism? For example, traffic speed traps, police interactions, etc.
The biggest thing that I see and that concerns me is people putting their head in the sand.